So I think it's really important to note that the way intersectionality plays out in our world is that we don't know where transphobia ends and where racism starts. We don't know where transphobia ends and misogyny starts.
Hi, this is Aisha Hauser. I'm a minister at the Church of the Larger Fellowship, and this is our podcast. I wanted to thank you for joining us today. I hope this inspires you, hope it builds your faith, hope it gives you perspective to experience the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Bienvenidos, welcome everyone to this week's episode of The View. We are so glad that you've taken time out of your schedule to join us. We are really grateful for your presence and to be able to share this space with you. Today, we are going to do a host special, which means we don't have a guest. You get the benefit of direct interaction with all of our awesome hosts. I'm Cristina Rivera, she, her pronouns. I'm coming to you from beautiful Stanton, Virginia.
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser, she, her pronouns, and I'm in Seattle, Washington.
Hello, everyone. This is Michael Tino joining you from beautiful Peekskill, New York, a little bit north of New York City. My pronouns are they and them, and it is good to be with you.
I'm Don Fortune. I am coming to you from South Jersey, way down by Atlantic City. They, them pronouns, and it's great to be here. And Aisha and I were left unsupervised last week, so apparently somebody thought that probably wouldn't be a good idea again, so now all four of us are here.
It was fun. Don't exaggerate. So I have a correction. Last week I said, and all over the internet apparently, I don't feel so bad that I thought this. Someone had tweeted out a picture of Kyle Rittenhouse, the one teenager who's on trial for murdering two people in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The picture here to have a woman behind the car that everyone assumed was his mother. Someone said that's his mother. She drove him. Well, according to PolitiFact, there is no evidence that his mother, Wendy Rittenhouse, drove him there. That has been debunked. No charges were filed. She apparently didn't know until after the fact what happened. He also didn't go. He got the gun from a friend of his stepfather. So I just wanted to correct that according to PolitiFact and other fact-checking sources, and the courts who did not charge her, because that was my wondering, like, why wouldn't she be charged? She wasn't charged because apparently it didn't happen. So I just wanted to put that out there. So one of the things that happened in Seattle last week, I don't know if it happened in your area. Last Friday, Seattle school had to close. They hadn't planned on closing because so many teachers took the day off Friday because Veterans Day was Thursday. They couldn't find enough subs. So how this came out in conversation was that the oligarchy, the powers that be, in violent extractive capitalists, the owners, the billionaires, are underestimating how fed up most people are with everything. The folks who are not returning to their jobs, the folks who are finding other ways to make money. And I'm curious how, in what ways this will impact Unitarian Universalism and how we will be responsive to really the changing landscape, we being some of us who have been really thought leaders in the faith, the four of us included. Gone are the days of we only meet Sunday mornings are sacrosanct for worship and we show up and we wear, whatever kinds of formal clothing. And rather, this is now much more open and expansive and imaginative. So I wonder, in what ways we will be responsive to what's happening in the world right now, which is more, I think, than is being reported.
And what are our obligations as religious institutions to be moral employers?
Yeah, I think that's got to be a huge part of the conversation, right, Michael? Because the exodus of religious professionals, and in particular religious professionals of color over the past year, has been significant. And a lot of that exit has been at the behest of budgets and finance committees and boards that would rather keep an endowment than continue to employ a person. And that has moral and ethical implications for our faith and for what we say our faith is.
Yep. I mean, I'm still in the face of quite literally the world burning and so much uncertainty what is all this money hoarding doing? And not, I mean, many congregations have endowments. And I know Shelter Rock's the big one with Veach, for over 400 million, but some of them have 80, some of them have 3, some of them are 8 million. And so what's the plan here? To do what with? When? If this isn't a rainy day, I'm not clear what is, and why wouldn't we want to support people living?
And, you know, the fact is that endowments in of themselves are not an evil mechanism. There are ways to use them that will help fight for our liberation. And so we have to be thinking about these pools of money that have been accumulated on the backs of Black and Brown and Indigenous folks in the US for hundreds of years, and really think about what is the ways in which we need to be putting that money to use.
Well, they're tools that can be used to further our values, that can be used to live our liberation, that can be used to invest in reparations for past harm, or they can be used to create more harm.
Not unlike committees. They are where good intentions go to die sometimes. You know, we'll save all this money for an emergency, and then the dependent clause just gets lopped off, and we'll just save all this money. So I think it's worth mentioning also that I'm seeing, and Michael, I don't know if you are as well, I'm seeing a lot of clergy that seem to be tapping out of professional ministry altogether, like gonna go be a chaplain or gonna go into private practice as a therapist or whatever. I think that's going to be a significant challenge in the year ahead for our denomination and for our congregations.
Happening with all religious professionals, administrators, musicians, religious educators. I mean, yes, clergy, ordained clergy, and staff. You know, if you have a congregation who's literally debating whether or not they should pay you, I mean, do you not see the writing on the wall? And for clergy, the religious educators, and those who are interacting with a very exhausted, fearful public, of which we are a part, we're burnt out. There's a burnout that is just, I think, been underestimated in the helping professions.
Shige Sakurai writes in our chat, there's a whole conversation here about the at-will framework of employment, labor rights, etc. I think it's absolutely true. And, you know, and I think, you know, when the pandemic hit, I went to work and I didn't have a Sunday off for 9 months because I wasn't leaving my house and nobody else was willing or able to do it. I mean, I guess people were able. It's, I guess, part of white supremacy culture that I was the only one who could do it. I was not the only one who could do it. I was the only one who did it. And that comes at a cost. It comes at a cost to the community because they get out of the practice of doing it. It comes at a cost to the professional who burns out. It comes at a cost to the relationship between the professional and the community. So we're learning that now. Unfortunately for lots of people, the easiest way to deal with that is to move on to something else.
Frankly, there's also a concern of who is going to be coming out of retirement to take the interim ministry positions that are going to be open. And frankly, we need to be looking at that and making sure that we're bringing folks in that are in alignment with where this faith is going. And sometimes that's not where we have been. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
And I want to expand on Shige's point. I think what Shige is also getting at is the idea of not having unions, because at will, folks can get fired without cause. And just if we're going to keep violent extractive capitalism, which it is here now, it needs a soul. How do we insert some kind of conscience to this? Because here's what freaks me out. During a pandemic, how much money has been made in the stock market? Side note, when people talk about socially responsible investing in the stock market, I have said more than once, there is no such thing. The stock market is not set up to be socially responsible, as evidenced by when we had the hate pumpkin in for 4 years, the stock market went up. When we had a global pandemic and people were dying by the millions globally, the stock market went up. People made money hand over fist. So help me understand. I mean, there seems to be, we're operating on a cognitive dissonance that somehow socially responsible investing even exists. And look, I have money in the stock market because of our retirement funds. They're all in stock, they're invested. So it's not at all that I'm free of this at all. I am not off the grid. I'm in a house, I have electricity, all of that. And I recognize that I live in a cognitive dissonance. It's like the stock market is immoral. It has no morality, or it's maybe amoral is what I'm trying to say. Like, it has no connection to anything being right or wrong. It's just, let's make as much, well, maybe one could make a case that the only goal of just making money in light of what's happening right now maybe is immoral.
Well, I mean, the stock market goes up when corporate profits increase, right?
And corporate
Yes.
profits increase when other expenditures are cut, which generally means staff.
The incentive is to be more violent and more extractive in your capitalism so that stock prices go up. I won't even ascribe amorality to that. I think that the incentive, if the point is the price has to keep going up, then the incentive is to immorality right off the bat. You know, if you're okay like having a stock, I mean, there are what's called value stocks that you don't expect the price to go up, but you make money from dividends. If you're okay with that stock price never going up, then there's a different incentive.
And there's for-profit prisons. I mean, one of the things I did make clear to whoever's investing this retirement money, I don't want a penny going to for-profit prisons or guns. I mean, here's what I'm going to say, something controversial again. The idea of disinvesting from gas and oil, I understand. I'm not as worked up about that because I fly planes and I drive a car. That is a more complicated thing, I think. And maybe this is not maybe, it is my justifying being okay with money being in oils. But I feel like for me, if I'm going to have a line, it is definitely guns and for-profit prison systems, not any of that being invested. But I don't love, obviously, fossil fuel companies. However, I'm not quite as worked up about them, which maybe that's foolish. I don't know.
Well, I wanted to pivot from where we are in the world to one of the topics that we had wanted to cover today, which is that it is the Trans Day of Remembrance. So if some of you all recall, earlier this year, we had Trans Day of Visibility, which was in March and will be recognized again in March of 2022. We also take this day, Trans Day of Remembrance, to really think about the folks that we have lost, both known and unknown folks that we have lost in the trans community. And one of the things that sits with me about this day is how, when we first approached covering this day on The View, one of the requests that we had from our trans colleagues was to also make sure that we're giving as much time to the Trans Day of Visibility and to trans joy and to the thriving of the trans community, and how important it is to have both of those in balance and to be able to honor what is lost, but also honor that which is beautiful and joyful in the trans community. So I open the conversation with that.
Thank you. So I think it's important to note for people who don't know out there that the Transgender Day of Remembrance specifically holds up the memories of people who have been killed, who have been murdered because of their transgender identity around the world. I opened up the list. Part of the ritual of the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is Saturday, is to read this list of names. And in some places, they read also how people were killed, because it's a reminder of the violence that transgender people are exposed to on a regular basis, that is targeted at transgender people on a regular basis. And I opened up this list before the show, and it's 63 pages long this year. This is just the people who've been killed since last November.
That have been reported.
That have been reported, and where those murders have been linked to transgender identity. Yeah, and right. So the people we know about, the list is 63 pages long, and most of these pages have 7 or 8 names on them. So you can do the math in your head. I didn't count. They're not numbered, so I didn't count, but you can do the math in your head. Most of the people on this list are trans women of color. So I think it's really important to note that the way intersectionality plays out in our world is that we don't know where transphobia ends and where racism starts. We don't know where transphobia ends and misogyny starts. And
Transphobia is rooted in misogyny.
yeah, so much of this is a complex interplay of racism, transphobia, misogyny, and other forms of oppression. So to look at this list and to note that most of the people here are BIPOC trans women, it's important to know for our community.
It's one of the things I've been asked to speak opening prayer words things at an event tomorrow in Atlantic City. And I've been thinking a lot recently about Marsha P. Johnson, who was the Black trans sex worker who was absolutely at the forefront of the Stonewall uprising and whose name has been largely whitewashed out of many tellings of that story. And I'm aware that 40% of homeless youth are homeless because they've been rejected at home because they're LGBTQ in some way, shape, or form. And LGBTQ kids are exponentially more likely to engage in risky behavior that can result in unexpected pregnancies and drug addiction and a variety of medical and mental health diagnoses that just come about when you're that far up against the wall. I'm going to be in Atlantic City tomorrow, where so much of that is front and center in that little bitty city with big city problems. I think what I want to do is I want to challenge people to really think how you might respond if Marsha Johnson were to approach you on the street. How would you respond if you were in a convenience store and Marsha walked in? How would you respond if Marsha came into church on a Sunday morning after a long night of work? You know, it's 2021, and there's a great deal of comfort in much of the queer community. You know, there's this sort of sense that we've arrived, right? Because, you know, we've got houses in the suburbs and minivans and kids in soccer camp. But not all of us, you know, not those who are people of color, not those who are living with disabilities, not those who are marginalized in other ways. White queer people with a certain degree of passing privilege, or let's just say non-offensive privilege. Don't give the cis het folks the willies, right? That kind of privilege, are doing pretty okay. But everybody else is not. Everybody else is not. And I've been thinking a lot about Marsha Johnson lately. And I'm thinking about Marsha Johnson and us, Unitarian Universalists. You know, we hold her up as this beacon of illumination and bravery. And I can imagine very few of our people embracing her, physically embracing her, because Black trans sex workers represent a lot of what white supremacist patriarchy really rejects. The patriarchy hates trans women because they appear to have given up male privilege, and that is a betrayal. And white supremacy doesn't like people of color because they're different, and especially if they're loud and proud and in your face, they remind you of just how unfair this world is. And sex workers have historically been shamed by everybody except the temple priests way back when. And all of that is intersected, and all of that, when you look at the violence of poverty and the violence of having to engage in survival sex to eat, and understanding that so many of our queer youth have so many opportunities denied them because of who they are. And every opportunity denied is sort of a brick onto the road of a more difficult, more painful life. And would we embrace a Black trans sex worker who's been turning tricks all night, probably smells of cigarette and drugs and not having bathed more recently than would be good? And like, this is real. This is, are we as progressive as we like to think we are? Or would we hand her little plastic cards to get some groceries and wish her well? Would we invite her to sit next to us in church? Would we invite her to engage with our children in church? Would we encourage her to sing? Would we welcome all of the vibrant, colorful, creative, beautiful essence of her who has managed to make a really, really hard situation into something joyful? Every picture we've ever seen of Marsha Johnson, she's smiling. She's smiling. That was a person filled with joy. Would we permit that joy, that unruly, uncomfortable to polite society joy in our congregations? I don't know. I don't know. It's worth thinking about, you know?
Whew, thank you for that, Dawn. I want to lift up the Black Trans prayer book. It is written by two Black trans folks, Jay Mace III and Jane Figueroa Adidi. And he won the Lammy Award for transgender nonfiction. I put the link for Tanner to post, so please go support that book. On the website for the Black Trans prayer book, there are also t-shirts you can buy. Transphobia is a sin. Trans people are divine. Trans people exist because our ancestors existed. So there is merchandise and the book you can support and help Black trans people thrive in addition to surviving. So I hope you all go check that out.
Thank you, Dawn, for preaching that word that we all need to hear. I hope folks can take that word and bring it home into our congregations in a way that helps us bust open the crucial conversations that need to happen, that really tie us back to our faith and to our theology about what it means to get everyone free.
Well, and we can take a moment here also to recognize that at Church of the Larger Fellowship, the largest growth in our membership recently has been in our incarcerated membership, the incarcerated Unitarian Universalists that we serve, just past the 1,400 mark. One of the reasons for that growth is because incarcerated people who are LGBTQ are finding us, and a lot of whom are trans incarcerated people, a lot of whom are trans women of color incarcerated in our society, and who are finding Church of the Larger Fellowship because they are desperate for a religious community that accepts them for all of who they are. We can celebrate that we do our best to be that. It's not without struggle for those of us who are free world folks.
I would like our congregations to be what our incarcerated members imagine us to be when they get out and want to come to church.
Don, that just so perfectly reflects what our youth want us to be when they become young adults, when they bridge from the religious education program into this unknown congregation that doesn't reflect the Unitarian Universalism that they grew to know and love. We have to be able to do that. Well, I'm going to invite the spirit of life and love into this space because I think we need it. Or maybe I just need it. And I'm going to do it because I can. Spirit of life and love, come into this space with us. Be with us as we talk about the heavy knowledge of those 60-some pages that Michael talked about of folks this past year. Beautiful souls who were held and not held in violence, held in love, held in all of the things that we wanted for them and for ourselves, and yet our imperfections allowed for that to be taken from us. Hold us as we know that those souls, those beautiful souls cannot be forgotten. We are responsible for each other. We are responsible for remembering those souls, for taking them with us, for celebrating them, and for mourning them, because it diminishes us all. That loss diminishes us all. The loss of even one diminishes this world. And we need that. We need that love. We need that beauty. We need, we need to recognize that which holds us together and makes us better together. So, Spirit of life and love, as we go out into our world this week, help us remember our better selves. Help us remember our privilege that we have to put on the line in order to care for those that are more vulnerable than us. And help us remember the Unitarian Universalism that dares us to be greater, that dares us to love harder, to go into the discomfort that comes with loving those that we do not understand, that loving those that we cannot even imagine, but we know are just as much a part of our lived love and experience in this world. Amen. Blessed be Ashe.
Thank you so much for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It's because of you that our ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/podcast for more information. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure to subscribe, to rate it, and to review it so that others can find us. Thanks again for listening. Have a great day.